Awesome.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much, Eli, for being here. So today our seminar speaker series focuses on time management, and I'm just going to pass the virtual mic to Eli now so that she can talk about this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Eli, and I'm just going to do a presentation on time management. So I hope you guys enjoy. So let's just get started here. Okay, so who am I? Like I said, my name is Eli. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. And I just would like to do a little acknowledgement of where I'm connecting from today, which is from unceded Indigenous lands. And the Ganyan-Gahaga Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters of which I am connecting from. And Jojagaha, or Montreal, is historically known as the gathering place for many First Nations. So Montreal, Jojagaha. A little bit about me. I'm a developer at Shopify. I work on a team called the Context Tools, and we work on an application called the Vault. And the Vault is basically just a source of truth platform. We have like all our internal documentations there, and it's great for sharing important company context. So that's the tool I work on. I typically work on the back end of it, but sometimes I do some front end work as well. And a little bit about me and my my resume, I guess, is I started off with after high school doing a degree in communications, and I liked that, but I wanted to do something a bit different, more creative. So I went in to start doing. I took a college course called multimedia management, and that's where I kind of went into the world of web development and web design. And started working at Shopify soon after that. And then I applied actually for a dev degree program, which I hear some people are familiar with here. And basically that program allowed me to work on a couple of teams across Shopify until I graduated and received a degree in computer science. And then I was able to join the team that I'm on right now full time. And I've been there working on that team ever since. Some little personal things about me. I am a proud member of the 2SL LGBTQ community. I own a Shopify store because how can you not if you work at Shopify? We actually sell androgynous underwear. And I have a loving wife and 2 fur babies. I have a pupperino named Boba. And I have a cat who kind of acts more like a roommate than anything. His name is Yui. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, but let's get to the actual presentation. So what we're going to talk about is time management, and we'll talk about what is it and how we can get started on maybe a form of time management. We'll take a look at some tools and practices that go well with time management, your time management strategy. And I have a little bit of a word of caution at the end, nothing too drastic, but just to keep the critical thinking going. And I'll leave some time at the end for any questions. Cool. So let's get started. What is time management? I mean, this is pretty easy. You could Google this. It's the first thing that shows up, time management definition. It's just basically a process of planning and exercising the conscious control of time and spent on specific activities, especially to increase, and what I highlighted here is the effectiveness and the efficiency and productivity of a person's tasks. And what I'd like to get to is sharing kind of my personal experience with it, because there's no real one-size-fits-all version of time management, building that skill. And so I'd like to give it more in the context of what worked for me in the past, and maybe you can apply some of these skills or practices yourself. So let's get back a bit to the definition that I highlighted here, the conscious control of time, and see how we can use that to help manage our time. So why should we manage our time? If you're asking yourself the question of like, why do I never seem to have enough time to get everything done? Or if you're like feeling swamped or stressed or overwhelmed with the amount of work ahead of you, or if you have new skills in the horizon, or you want to plan bigger goals, but maybe you don't seem to feel like you have the time to actually get those done, then it might be good to take a step back and see what time management skills that you could kind of one up and see what might work out better for you. And so what you will get out of good time management is you can better assess how you're spending your time and really actually uncover those time sinks in your day. So typically we have this idea in our head that like we have this idea of how we spend our time, but that idea doesn't actually reflect reality. And time management actually brings kind of more the reality of how you're spending your time in the forefront, so that you can actually start to allocate your time better. And you can start to also, it helps really well with clarifying your goals. So you can make sure you're actually working towards those goals and prioritizing those goals over maybe some things that don't seem to actually be helping you in the future. And, like you can also reallocate that time to prioritize the work and the goals that are important to you. And some other things are just to overcome common obstacles that you keep from doing or the work that you should be doing. So this tool really, or this practice really kind of helps with that. Cool. So how do you actually get started with time management? I've taken some of this information from some reputable sources. The Harvard Business Review is a journal or a journal, peer-reviewed journal that typically takes articles, and they've put together a lot of resources of all across business sectors, and time management is one of them. And I've leaned heavily on some of the things that they've kind of amalgamated in their series on time management. But they have a nice process where they look at a pre-assessment of how you're doing right now. What's the picture of how you're working right now? And then they have a 3 kind of step process of planning and prioritizing, and the performance part of actually getting your time management skills in the works. So we're going to take a look at that, and then we're going to kind of like come back and say we're going to look at the kind of a reassessment of the situation, because this is kind of time management's more of a cycle than just like something that you can like set and forget. It's a process that you kind of want to be continuous and it be part of your journey while you're doing other things and trying to get work done and stuff like that. So look at first at this pre-assessment step. And I have on the next slide more of a visual, so that like we can kind of talk about break down what these steps are for this pre-assessment process. Essentially, what needs to be known about time management is that time management is actually self-management. You're managing yourself and how you work with maybe other people, or how you work with the work that you want to get done. So it's really important at the beginning to really state your objectives or your goals that you're trying to get out. You're trying to get out of the time management process. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take those objectives and you're going to break down you're going to take a holistic view and look at the responsibilities and the categories that you kind of over maybe like a week or a 2-week period, what you actually do. And like to kind of come up with an example of this, if we think about the school lens, like that could be anything from like studying or homework or writing an exam or writing a research paper or doing the actual research. These are all things that individually are categories that are going to take up your time for that very specific need, which is school. And this also translates to work, which I'll use a bit more of the work example because I'm more in the workforce but I have a lot of school experience. So I could definitely pull some examples from there as well, where these things will help you out. And then part of this process is you'll basically, over the 2 weeks, you'll track the time you spend in each of these categories. And at the end of this, you'll examine those results, and then we can move on to that planning and prioritizing and performing steps, which is the best part. It's actually putting that plan into action. So here's an example of a timesheet. It's actually a pretty, I had a great time actually creating these things because I actually got to put my words or these words into practice. And here's a very realistic excerpt of actually my life and what I do in my job. And you can see at the top here, I have my categories that we kind of talked about. So these core responsibilities are what takes up the majority of my time. But you can see personal growth. I'm not spending a lot of time in that category throughout the week. And I tend to manage people. This is an interesting category where managing people can be anything from like how, like if I have subordinates or if I have a lead, that's me managing people, or me in meetings. That's me interacting with people. So that takes up time as well. And that's important to note. Free time is time also. So like how much time am I spending not working or not getting tasks done? So it's important to capture that. I have a couple other categories here: administrative tasks and long-term project planning and helping others, and just nice little total at the end. But the thing that we talked about at the beginning was setting these objectives. And one of my main objectives that I would use here is I wanted to spend, and this is something that I've talked with my lead about, is spending more time on personal growth and this long-term project planning. It actually is my objective at the end of the day, is to move up in my career. And these are the two areas that I'm not spending enough time to grow in. So just by kind of watching how I spend my week or 2 weeks, I can easily see here that I have two areas that I could focus more time on, so that I can get to that end goal. So that's what brings. Another like way of visualizing this is actually putting it in a pie chart. Sorry for the bad contrast. I'm obviously very particular to some colors, but you can see again, like this is a great way to visualize exactly where I'm spending my time. And this is like a technique that you can use as well. So then we can move on now actually to the funner part, like the actual, okay, how do I meet those objectives now? How do I take back my time, which is actually the first step here. And basically, we're just going to take what we learned and develop the plan I need to spend my time more wisely in the future. And so yeah, there's some easy steps here. The first thing is that you're going to want to reclaim that time. You're basically going to reallocate the time that you think that you should be spending in each of these categories. And you're going to create what I like to call, I know I didn't coin this, but the big picture vision. And you're going to, in this big picture vision, you're going to prioritize those categories now, and then allocate the time that you think each of those categories need. You're going to set some goals for each of those. And then what's really important here is actually outlining the key tasks you need to get done to actually meet those goals. And then just one last step here is like actually doing a really good reality check of this big picture vision that you're creating, because at the end of the day, you're going to be looking at this thing and being like, ah, so perfect. Every minute of my day is perfectly managed, and I can't wait. I can't wait to put this plan into action, and everything that I've ever wanted to do is going to get done. But reality again kind of kicks in, and things will come up, and there might be priorities or categories that you missed, and there might be events that happen that changes things. So just make sure that your plan is also has room to adapt, and there's room to breathe and room to stress manage and stuff like that. But we could take a look at that big picture vision now. So like I was saying before, I've now, I made one mistake. I didn't get around to this. I didn't actually prioritize. I should have prioritized my big picture vision a little bit better, but hopefully you can kind of pick up that I've allocated more time to those categories or those goals that I said that I would like to accomplish. And so I'm now spending 9 more hours in finalizing project proposals. That's my goal, is to finalize project proposal for this new communication infrastructure that I'm going to build. And that's going to leverage my career, because that's a huge impact that I can have on the next task I'm going to take. But the important part like I mentioned before, is actually looking at these key tasks. Like, what are the tasks that I need to do to actually get to that goal? So breaking down those tasks, it's actually really beneficial because you get more of an idea of, you'll be more accountable for the things that you need to do. And typically when your tasks are broken down, it's easier to see actually the end goal, or the path that you can take to get this done. So yeah, so I spent a little bit more time in that. And the other side of this is actually is where I took away time. And one of them is in this kind of last section here, the external support. Now, like, it's going to sound weird, like external support, maybe I didn't explain it a bit earlier, but like external support to me is helping other people when there's like a crisis is happening, or they have a question. And so we have a help channel that people come in and really I was spending a lot of time, little chunks of time, but they were taking up a lot of time during my day. And it's not necessarily that I don't want to be helpful at all. That's not the idea here. It's that I don't want to prioritize that time over the actual goals that I have. So what I'm saying on my big picture vision is that I'm not going to allocate time for this. I'm going to reduce it. And then maybe there's some nice things that I can do. Like, I can either delegate those tasks to other people on my team, or I can check in twice to make sure that there's no fires. And if there's not, then maybe I can kind of creep into the other time slots that I have. But yeah, so like that's our big picture vision. And then we can finally now like take a look and get shit done, as they say at Shopify. I hope that's an appropriate word to say right now. Great, thumbs up, excellent. But yeah, we actually call it Get Shit Done, or GSD. I work very closely with the GSD team and they typically work on project management and project management software, which we will get into a little bit when we look at the tools. But you can imagine it's very centered around time management as well. And performance is, or this part is about really actually just, now that you said that you're going to do something, you gotta kind of have to do it. So the technique we're going to talk about is time boxing. And time boxing is pretty straightforward. It's just a breakdown of your schedule into a number of small time periods. And then you basically just take all those like small time periods and you put your tasks and your key categories and your tasks into them. So I'll show you a slide after, which basically shows my calendar. That's where I apply these things. But before I show that, just want to kind of talk about the advantages of these ones. I won't go into every single one, but obviously I think we talked a bit about this this category, but accountability, like putting this onto paper, putting this into a calendar, and putting a specific time frame out there, it really just makes you more accountable to get that task done. So you actually know how much time you have left at the end of the day to get that done, and it'll keep you more on top of it. It's more efficient because at the end of the day, you can now start, you have a plan, and what you can deduce from that plan is all the things that are actually more related to each other. And a beautiful example of this is getting emails done and looking at your Slack channels or your channels of communication, and kind of seeing like, oh yeah, these are very similar things. I can probably get them done in the same time area. So that's a pretty important or a pretty great benefit to time boxing. Other things, time awareness, a nice healthy pressure on yourself to get something done. Great for focusing because you've actually allocated time to a very specific task, versus like maybe if you're kind of like me and get distracted by birds outside, it's just so easy to kind of lose track of what you're working on. But with this kind of time boxing technique, your task is kind of allocated to you. And then there's like the effectiveness of it. And the effectiveness part is a really interesting thing, because typically you could be on two sides of the spectrum here of like, something doesn't mean that much to me, so here's my work. But there's sometimes where it's just like, when do you stop working towards perfection. And like the effectiveness of time boxing is sometimes something is just good enough. And you've allocated that time, and at the end of it, you don't have to spend any more time, like scraping for that extra, or like that extra good, well-versed paragraph in your essay, or maybe the like, if we talk about code a little bit, like what's the perfect algorithm that I can write, or what's the most efficient thing, like the green path, or just the good enough path is exactly what it is. Like sometimes just good enough, and you get to now actually have more time to do those other things that you have on your task list. So yeah, let's take a look at my my beautiful chart, my beautiful calendar, which now is live in production. Again, it's very accurate to my real day-to-day stuff. Like, so you can see here, I've at the top of here, I've kind of, those are my categories for the administrative tasks. I only spend my mornings now on that. And I've given my morning big chunks in my morning to get that project proposal stuff done. So now I'm actually working towards my goal, and I've given myself permission and time to work on those things. And the really nice thing about that is it doesn't really actually take away from that bottom kind of big bluish green section of my focus time, my core responsibilities, my actual job that does, at the end of the day need to get done. But I still have this nice like map in a sense of how I can get it all done. So that's kind of like really the benefit of taking these steps and finally seeing it, like, and applying it to your actual life and your work, or again, like for school, this is very similar. Obviously, I know for school during the day, you don't get a lot of control of how your day goes, but those like after hours and after hours, there's definitely time that you can use to your advantage, so that you don't have to, like, I don't know about you, but when I was in high school and in especially my first couple of years of university, I was not a very good time manager, and I always ended up with very late at the end of the, at the crunch line, tasks needing to be done, and that's when the overwhelming feelings came in, and the stress, and it, this takes it back a bit, where all of a sudden it just actually feels like you actually have a lot more time on your hands, because everything, hopefully not too meticulously, is planned out for you, but you can see where it can kind of go from there. Yeah, so I was going to do a little bit of a game in between here, just to kind of like take a little break and move on, but I know this is a recording, so we'll push right through, and maybe at the end we'll look at the two games. But this is what I like to call the meat and potatoes. The tools. Everybody loves the tools. What are the cool tools that I can use for time management? And honestly, I looked at a lot, had fun looking at a lot, but I cannot rightfully say that there's anything better than really just falling back on the basic tools here. They're tried and true. They've worked for the majority of people. The majority of people bring them back or try to replicate them in applications and technologies these days. But sticking to the basics is where I would definitely at least start. And those things are like your to-do list, your agenda or calendar, a journal, a blank kind of sheet journal, and a clock or some device that just basically records time, a way of you to track time, pretty essential in time management, I would think. But I won't spoil you too much with just looking at those. Just looking at those tools, we'll look a little bit at some advanced tools for individuals, and maybe some advanced tools for groups or teams that you can also use to help you manage your time with other people. Yeah, so we won't talk about all of them, but some of the main ones I'd definitely like to cover for the advanced tools are some techniques, is like the Notion and Todoist. Pomodoro Technique is very interesting, especially since we just talked about time boxing and it's an interesting strategy that we can apply to time boxing. We'll talk a bit about the priority matrix, which is a really cool tool that can help you actually prioritize the things that you're going to be, like all the tasks that you do have. And then, yeah, we want to, I have to admit, we have to talk about the bullet journal because my wife is a huge fan, and I would be remiss to not bring it up. So we'll talk a little bit about that one as well. Okay, so the to-do list. So in its simplest actions, what is the to-do list? I don't think anybody here is not going to know what a to-do list is, but how can you apply it to time management? You just, every day you find yourself a little bit of time to write out your daily tasks that you need to complete. And anything that's kind of in the future, you just don't use your to-do list for that task. You kind of actually move it to your calendar. So that way, when you come to that actual day, that's when you actually, you put it back into that to-do list. So it's kind of the actions that I'd like to take. And then you can kind of take advantage of this, prioritize your task list in the order that you need to get it done, or maybe the order that it has the most impact. We'll talk about that a little bit. And I don't talk about this a little later. I took it out a bit, but it's a really great way to boost dopamine. And if you don't know about the advantages of boosting dopamine, I highly recommend a book I'll show you guys at the end that will help you build habits, and it's all about kind of like brain chemicals and kind of nerdy, kind of cool stuff like that. But we won't go into it just yet. Okay, so what's my preferred tool? It's really is the simplest thing. I don't use pen and paper. That's my one vice, but I do use the Notes app on my iPhone. It's the Google Keep is the equivalent. It's literally just a text box. And how I use it is I put a date at the top and I put my to-do list. And then every day I just insert a new date at the top. And the cool thing about that is I have I think I started doing this actually at the beginning of when I started dev degree. So that was about 4 or 5 years ago. And I have 5 years of this really, really, really long list in my iPhone Notes app that just basically is everything I did for that day. And it can get as nitty gritty as you want it. There's sometimes I'd be very surprised if I'm not the only person in this room who's literally wrote something down after I've done it, just to kind of check it off my list, just to kind of remember that I did it. It's just a very thrilling way of kind of getting something done. But there are some advanced tools that you can use for this kind of concept of the to-do list. The one I'm going to talk about a little bit is Notion. Just recently kind of started playing around with it. And it has a built-in to-do list that you can apply to a specific day. And then it has all these other features that you can use within the actual app. It's kind of like a to-do list on, I don't know, some sort of drug. But it's very good at kind of predicting the top kind of lists that you need as in your lifetime, so that you kind of keep a track of it all. And then another one that I've heard of a little bit about is Todoist, which is kind of a similar idea. It's got a desktop app and also there's a phone app as well. Same idea. It's just a task management software to organize your work. But here's a little kind of preview of Notion. So you can kind of see, the screens are a little small, but you can see that your to-do list kind of turns into some different areas. So if you have a reading list that you want to kind of keep track of, this is a great way that the app is very helpful in keeping track of something that you maybe don't need to get done, but you just want to keep a fresh copy of and kind of get it out of your head. Yeah, so Notion, pretty cool for that kind of simple concept. And then we'll talk a little bit about the agenda, the calendar. Obviously, we saw time boxing is a perfect example of this. And my way of kind of using the Google Calendar is I share my calendars with my partner and my team, and that way it shows transparency and what I'm working on versus like what they are and like what future events I have. And honestly, it's really hard to beat kind of any other version of a calendar than Google Calendar here. I mean, or like a calendar app in general. Like I do remember the good old agenda that we got in school, and I think those were really great. But I was kind of a scribbler and a page ruiner, and I would always plan something in the future, and then, like all of a sudden now that whole paragraph is gone and I'm out of room. And so I would have to kind of lean on more of technology here versus pen and paper for keeping track of your events and stuff. But yeah, so it's really hard to beat the calendar here. And obviously, like we saw an example of that. There's the Tom box again, but some really neat features that Google Calendar also offers is all these kind of cool insights. And unfortunately, my insights are kind of lame because I don't think I was using the Google Calendar to its best potential before, but you can kind of see like it breaks down. Actually, it kind of does the time boxing for you, or those steps we talked about for you, and lets you know where you are spending your time. So like, how much time am I spending on meetings every day? That's a really big thing with remote work these days. Is meetings are tiring and cause fatigue and stuff like that. So spending less time in those areas is pretty important, and it's kind of cool. I don't know, and it tells you also like little insights of like, maybe you should spend just schedule your focus time better, and makes little small adjustments for you. So that's pretty cool. Okay, the journal. This is what I kind of alluded to. We'll talk about the bullet journal, the infamous bullet journal that my wife swears by. But honestly, at its simplest form, it's a notebook. It's where you dump your thoughts in. And it's honestly really great for brainstorming. It's great for goal setting. It's great for reflection and tracking your progress. And that's something we didn't actually talk a little bit too much about, but tracking your progress while you're getting these things done is kind of doing that reality check again and saying like, am I meeting my goals? Do I need to allocate more time to this certain category? Do I need to spend more, do I need to spend more time researching, or do I need to spend more time looking into the code, or do I need to spend more time breaking down to tasks even further? So that's pretty great. Like journals are a great way of just kind of even reflecting back on how you felt or where you were, or any ideas that you need to jot down. Journals. What can I say? Yeah, again, my way of doing it, I just go back to the good old notes app, same kind of principle. If I need to jot something down, I have just one fat list of journal entries. I'm not a huge journal entry person, but when I do use it, I use it in the same style, kind of just like a top down, push all the information down, and now you get this kind of cool one area that you save it in. But you guys aren't interested in that. You're interested in the bullet journal. And I feel like I'm doing I feel like I'm selling this idea, but I swear I can only stand up for it because my wife does use it, and she's been using it for about 3 years now. And it's honestly well, let's go take a look at the example. It's such a great tool if you're a creative person and you want some constraints, but you don't want to be limited by the constraints somebody else creates for your journal. So it's kind of like a time planner, but you get to decide how that planner looks. And the neat thing about the Bujo, as they say, is that there's just a whole community out there who creates all these like templates that you can basically copy and then put in your book, like your own version of the book. And the kind of the principle behind it is you have this book that you keep for a whole year. And you keep track of kind of everything in there. So like you can see, like you can have your weekly planner in there. I think I put 2 weekly planners actually, unfortunately, but there's a lot of other examples. Monthly planners, goal setting, day planners, they have techniques for these things. And It's a whole journey. It's a whole other presentation, and I don't want to sell it too much. You don't have to do this. It's just a really cool tool to look at. But the one benefit I do, one last benefit I'll talk about is like this index page that it creates, because we do have this tendency to kind of actually forget what we've done, or like I kind of talked about the agenda, your sections get filled out, and then all of a sudden you have to start a new thing. The really cool thing about this is you create this at the first page is an index page, or like a table of contents. And each page that you create, just basically you're manually numbering. So you can always now go back, refer to where you put something in. And that way you have actually like, it's your own book. And it's kind of the really nice part about that is at the end of the year, you have a really cool book to look back on. And yeah, I think my wife's at 3 copies, so or three pretty solid books, and she's running out of colors in the blue shade. So we're gonna have to move on to a new color next year, unfortunately for her. But yeah, pretty cool. All right, and then we kind of like talked about this like kind of idea of the clock or the timer, and in its simplest form, honestly, given a task, you just set a timer and kind of to the estimated time you're going to complete the task. And don't forget to, like, at this point, like, accommodate for breaks and decision fatigue. This is definitely a real thing that you need to be accountable for. But essentially, it's the same kind of concept as the time boxing. Again, you're just basically blocking off a specific time, and you have this form of a timer to keep track of how you're spending that time. And my way, there's other things that I like to apply to in the concept of time. I like to set like a lot of time limits on areas that I'm spending probably a bit too much distraction time in. There's a lot of great features on phones these days of like kind of turning off distracting apps or blocking yourself out of distracting apps. That way you can like set it. That way you can kind of get triggered out of the doom scroll, as they say. And maybe just kind of have, you know, I don't know if people here are on TikTok, but like whenever the woman comes on and tells me that to get off the app, I'm like, oh, she's right. So it does, you know, it does work. Another really important thing about time in general is like you want to set aside actual time for the planning part. Like this is sometimes we forget that planning itself takes up time as well. So it's something that I like to make sure that I do. And I just kind of keep, when I am working on focus time, I just try to keep my distractions at the minimum. So like turning off my notifications, like as an example right now, I know that I have notifications from work that I'm definitely ignoring because I've turned it off so that I don't get distracted while I present. And I keep my phone out of, like, especially when I'm working at my desk, I keep my phone, I do have it here today, but I keep my phone out of the room so that I'm not, you know, in those moments that I'm kind of waiting for something to get done, I'm not grabbing it and then spending a little bit too much time being distracted. But some advanced techniques, which I think are really cool, two we're going to talk about is the Pomodoro Technique and the priority matrix. And we'll start off with the Pomodoro. So if you haven't heard of it, it was basically created by a man who was finding himself incredibly distracted when trying to get any tasks done. And so he kind of created this step-by-step process that you take, but at its simplest form, a Pomodoro is a 25-minute time slot. So this is a technique that you could use if you were thinking that time boxing is like kind of the right step for you, but you're not sure how much time to allocate. In this sense, a Pomodoro is it's about 25 minutes long, and you take a task and then you set yourself. I have a little one right here. You set yourself like a little timer. Make sure that just doesn't go off in 55 seconds. And you work on the task until the time's up. And then the idea is you actually just take a 5-minute break after this, because at this point, you've been so focused on the task itself that, like, you know, the power has drained, the distraction fatigue or the decision fatigue has kicked in. So take the 5 minutes that you need to kind of recuperate or check on those things that maybe like you kind of pushed off in the 25 minutes. And then the kind of last step to this is like every 4 Pomodoros, so like every 4 25-minute intervals, you just take the longer break. You take like the time to eat, the time to go take your dog out for a walk, or the time to, you know, hug your kids or your mom or your dad or your grandma, like just go not do the task anymore. And some kind of rules to keep in mind about the Pomodoro technique is if you have complex tasks that are going to take longer than the 25 minutes, you want to break those down into kind of like these tiny 25-minute intervals. So like if the task would take more time than that, then there's probably subtasks that you can find in that big kind of idea that you can get done in a smaller amounts of time. And then the other thing, which we kind of talked about, which was like this effectiveness benefit, is combining the simple tasks. So like if you have a lot of things that are related, this is when you want to take those, crunch them in together, and you can probably get them all done in a sweet one Pomodoro or 2 Pomodoro process. Yeah. So and then the last kind of rule that they have as a guideline is you just cannot break away from the Pomodoro task. If something does come in that's distracting, like obviously we're not, like we're not in like little bubbles as much as we want to, especially in the offices or at school, people will come in, ask you questions. But if they have something that they need to get done, or you see something that needs to get done, it's often best to just move that task quickly to like a to-do list or write it down in your journal or anything like that, because you just want to take advantage of the time that you spend to focus on this, and you don't want to really break yourself from that concentration. So that's Pomodoro, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about the priority matrix. And the priority matrix is pretty cool because this is really going to actually help you, especially if it's something that you just don't know where to start. Priority matrix is typically really helpful for categorizing either those categories or those tasks that you need to get done based off of, again, like we talked about, like your goals or your objectives. It might not be actually clear that which one you want to do first, and which one you kind of want to get rid of. So like it's pretty simple, like 4 quadrants based off of like the axes of impact. So low impact versus high impact, and effort. So low effort, like how much effort it's going to take to get this thing done versus a lot of effort. And you can kind of see in just like this, like the bottom the quadrant, you have this like kind of fill in this due later task. And those are things that are like low impact and low effort. So it's not going to really mean anything to anybody else or yourself. It's not working towards your goals, then it's not something that needs to get done right now. It's but it's still probably pretty important to get done. So you're going to just kind of move it over, do it later. But if we kind of move up in our probably like our most satisfying category, which is the quick wins category. And these are the things, quick wins are things that are high impact and low effort. And that category is the things you want to do first. They're very gratifying. They're effortless, and they have really good impact. They have impact like the higher effort things too, but they have impact quicker. So it's typically the task that you want to prioritize at the top, so that you can, one and done them, quickly move them off. And if we move over to the next quadrant over here, which is like our high effort and high impact, these are things like typically like projects or things that are not easy to kind of break, to get done if we just kind of highly conceptualize them. So these are the things that you kind of like want to take advantage of your time management techniques, and you want to break down into smaller tasks, and you kind of want to schedule. But because of its high impact, you kind of want to do them next, because they're also, while they take more effort, they're going to get you closer to your goals, or make more people happy because you're having the impact that you kind of want to pass on. And then there's this like last category here, and it's I'm not a huge fan of the title, but they're the thankless tasks, the things that maybe it's important to somebody else, but it's not an immediate importance. Maybe it's like a question coming in, or like the bathroom has to be cleaned, but it's got cleaned yesterday. So, is it important? Is anybody going to be really happy if you cleaned it twice? No, those kind of things. So the great thing that you could do here is either you can delegate it. We kind of talked about that earlier. Delegate it, or just don't do it. There are things that they just might seem important, or they might seem like they have to get done. It might even be those things that we kind of talked about, which are like those perfection things, like the polish and stuff like that. But no one maybe at the end of the day is going to notice it, or it's not going to really make the difference between your grade or your performance review or anything like that. Push it to the side, or if you're in a great position, delegate it to somebody who might actually get more benefit from it. It might be a learning opportunity for them, or they're grateful for to kind of take on that work. That's kind of where those kind of tasks would go. So that's the priority matrix. Really great to use that in terms of in the planning stages, when you're looking at those timesheets and the big picture vision and the time box at the end of the day. And then finally, we'll look at just some tools for groups, because obviously time management doesn't just, it's not just about the self. It's obviously a big part of it, but you're going to be working with other people. You're going to be working in groups. If you're working at a company, you're going to be on a team of some sort. And typically when you're in this kind of even in school, you're going to be doing group projects all the time. When you're in this kind of style of working with other people, time management is a key factor into getting a really good project done, or doing a project really well. And the kind of simple construct of this is the Kanban method. And it's kind of just this idea of the word is Japanese for signboard. It came from the factories of Toyota in I think the 40s. And it was just really a kind of a style to create states of a project, and kind of keep this idea of what needs to get done, what is getting done right now, and what is done, and what does a project that's done looks like. Where the Kanban method, it really actually is typically what is used in all these advanced time or project management softwares or time management softwares. So a lot of examples that I looked at, and a lot of examples that I've use this kind of style of taking this kind of idea of a project, breaking it down into tasks, and then slotting those tasks into states and assigning people to each of those tasks. So we'll look at kind of an example here, which is Trello. But I'm sure that this is not the only kind of style. This is definitely not the only software that uses this method. But you can see we have this big board, and we have the kind of the states that I kind of talked about. So in this style, we have a to do, and there's a research state and an in progress state. And then I can't even read that word, review state, and a completed state. And you can see kind of there's little icons of people on each of these little cards, and each card is basically a task that needs to get done. And even at my work, we just basically assign ourselves or assign other people to these little tasks. And now we have transparency of who's working on what, and there doesn't need to be so much more micromanaging of how to get a project done. You have a beautiful holistic picture of what is ahead of you, and a done project at the end of the day, you can imagine, is just when all those little cards fall into the completed section. And the one thing that's not on here, which is a nice other kind of feature of the Kanban method or Trello or any of these project management tools, is you can also take advantage of that kind of like low effort, low impact category, that high effort, low impact category, where you have another kind of box or another state column in this, and it's called like either the ice box or the deathbed or something like that, where it's like, yeah, this task is not great, and or it's too hard or is not worth it. You know what, let's put it to the side. Like let's put ice on it, and we'll come back to it if we have time at the end of the the time period that we have. But you can now see like why, or you see more into the lens of why it's not, not everything has to get done at the end of the day, and why it was kind of put to the side. So that's kind of like the whole idea of time management. We kind of looked at like a key step of how to get started with it, and we kind of also looked at like the tools and the practices. And there was a point where I was going to talk a little bit about a section of like habit building, but for the sake of time, I just want to kind of end on like this really weird word of caution about time management. It's something that I fell like pretty hard for, and it's just more like a sense of critical thinking when we look at time management. A lot of the things I talked about is like time management practices and time management as a skill, but time management is also huge. Like it's a product. It's a very easily sold product because it especially like it tugs at the heartstrings. It has a lot to do with your performance. You'll have a lot of conversations with your boss or your like your teacher or your mentors about your time management skills. So it can be very personal when we kind of like when we want to try to figure out how to do it and do it well. And just kind of like as a little research, like a little fact of the thing is like it's a $41.8 billion industry, like the global personal development industry. So there's a lot of people out there who are going to try to sell whatever their version of the best time management skill is. And I want you to take everything that I've said with a grain of salt as well, right? Like this is my personal kind of experience with time management. But yeah, the most important thing is to just kind of remember that, like there's a lot of media out there, books and videos, influencers, and they all have their personal brand of what time management looks like or what's the best version of time management. But like you don't have to actually be afraid to just kind of question why that person or that video or that book is kind of subscribing this, asking you to subscribe to this particular method. We could talk at length about this. Like there's like ideas like hustle culture and or the 5 a.m. kind of method. And it's not to say that any of these things they don't work, or at the end of the day, they don't have some benefits, but it's really important to keep in mind that it's like, it is at the end of the day, a book that is being sold or a product that is being sold. And it's really important to keep your kind of self-awareness in mind when we're looking at these kind of products or these things that they talk about. So I'll end it with this. You will save yourself a lot of stress and time in the long run. And so that's it. So just I'll leave a little bit of time for questions if you have any. I'll read it. But that's my presentation on time management.